Coach Jeff Choate, welcome to the Mindset Advantage podcast and the special Coaching Beyond the Scoreboard series. I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
When I look back at your career path, I mean, Eastern Illinois to Boise State to Florida to Washington, Montana State, Texas, and now Nevada, you've been part of such a wide range of programs, cultures, coaching staffs, and regions all across the country. Coach, what have you learned from being in so many different environments when it comes to culture, leadership, connecting with players? What are some of the lessons you've learned from being at so many different spots?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing that you left out was probably the most significant, which is I spent 9 years as a high school teacher and coach. And I think that really framed how I look at relationships with young men in a coaching sphere. And I think that separates me from any other coach that I've been around. I mean, I've had other guys that I've worked with that were in high school, maybe for a hot minute, and realized immediately they were not cut out for that. But I spent 9 years as a high school teacher and coach, and got into administration. But I think the thing that the journey has taught me in general is that number one, relationships and authenticity always win. Kids can smell a fraud a mile away. Veteran coaches that are authentic can see that too. And so, being true to who you are and really trying to develop authentic relationships still travels and still wins.
I couldn't agree more. What does authenticity look like in action?
Yeah, I think it's being brutally honest. I think it's telling people the truth even if they don't want to hear it. I think it's being vulnerable and admitting that you have flaws as a leader and showing people your journey and how, hey man, I made this mistake. And I think all of those things are what I kind of see as being authentic.
I had a chance to have Bruce Brown on my podcast. Bruce has been in the leadership development space for 30, 40, 50 years, long time. One of the things he talked about was coaches have so much to learn from high school teachers, specifically in the high school realm. And one of the things he advises is for like a football staff to come in on a day in the summer and bring in the best teachers in the school and have a conversation with the coaches and the teachers and give the coaches a chance to learn from the teachers because the teachers see the student athletes more than the coaches. And we have so much to learn from the teachers. Coach, what would be the advice that you would give to coaches knowing that you've been in the classroom? How can coaches level up without having that teaching background?
Yeah, I think it's practice. I mean, I think you really have to dive into that. I think that, um, I think even Jeff Jones would have said, like, hey, like this guy's a master presenter. Like he's got this stuff down. I did special teams for Chris Peterson, which meant that our 15-minute meeting, he had a digital clock in the back and he always sat in the back left-hand corner. And he would, I knew how much time I had, but at 12 minutes, he'd go, you got 1 minute. I'm like, coach, I got three, you know? But what you learn to do is you learn to coach in sound bites. And I think that's, you got to remember, like, I don't know, I was reading an article the other day. I was talking about like what the average attention span is for an 18 to 22-year-old in the TikTok era is about 7 to 15 seconds. That's it.
Wow.
And so, like if you really want to make your point, it's got to be clear, concise, and repetitive. And I think that's what master teachers do is they're able to tell stories. I think storytelling is a big part of capturing your audience and bringing people in because I think it personalizes it and it come back to authenticity. Like, hey, like, this person's a credible source because they've lived this or they've seen this. And I think that's stuff that, really good teachers do. I think a lot of football coaches in particular, they want to be the smartest person in the room. I'd rather be the dumbest person in the room that can get the point across the best, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
We make football more complicated than it really is. And so, hey, how does this individual accomplish the task that we needed to accomplish in a given moment? And you have to make it as simple as possible in a lot of ways for them to understand it. And I think that's where things get lost in translation is people want to, have their clinic tape out there on the internet and wow, this guy's brilliant. He's got this, he's got that. The best teachers, the best coaches I've ever been around have a way to make something that seems complicated very, very simple. And Da Vinci, what's the quote? It's sophistication is the ultimate, or I'm sorry, that sophistication is the ultimate in complexity. Like the more that you can make something simple, the better it's going to be.
Do you have a
And that's what
memory?
great teachers do.
Do you have a memory in your coaching career where you had something that was complex and you were able to make it simple and you saw the results, or an example that you can recall?
Yeah, I think I can kind of look back on a number of things. I mean, I can also look at it the other way.
Mm.
Like when I was trying to be the guy that, well, I'm going to get up here and I'm going to reinvent football here and confuse not only myself but everybody else in the room, and it fell flat on its face. But I'll give you an example, and this is more related to this was Chris Peterson. We had a young man named Aaron Tevis that was a really talented player. I was coaching linebackers and special teams at Boise State at the time. And I've told this story a lot because I think it illustrates not only the ability to kind of break things down in a simple way, but also understanding how to coach your players, what that player can do, and not what you think they should do. So, I'm coaching linebackers, and I'm thinking, well, if you don't get a bloody nose every time you hit somebody, you're not playing linebacker, right? And that was kind of the smash mouth, whatever you want to call it, type of mindset. And Aaron had bad wrists, and he really didn't want to take on guys, right? So he wasn't going to be a guy that was going to punch it out or button press or strike a whole lot. But he's very, very athletic, long, rangy. And I know Chris Peterson comes to me. He's like, "Hey, why are we not playing Tevis? Like, what is going on here? This guy's by far the best athlete in your room." And he said something to me that was striking. He said, "The fact that you can't get the best athlete on the field is an indictment on you as a coach." And I was like, "Wow, that says something." And so like my mission was to figure out a way to make him be able to do what I needed him to do without doing it the way I thought it had to be done,
Mm.
the only way I thought it had to be done. And so we went into this, broke this series down about like, you know, I came to believe that to be an elite linebacker, you should be able to do it without a helmet and shoulder pads. Meaning you're gonna foot fake, you're gonna manipulate the block, and it took my coaching to the next level, but it was something so simple as knowing that the right guard is going to combo with the center and climb to you. And if you step to your left, he's going to chase you, and then you can foot fake him, you can Euro step him, you can slip him, you can chop, you can dip. All these different things that were very simple movements, but I thought you had to get your nose bloody to be able to do it, right? And
Mm.
so, like, breaking things down in that way made me a better coach, simplified the process for the player, and allowed us to get a better player on the field. But that would have never happened if Chris hadn't challenged my intelligence as a football coach.
I think what happens sometimes is as coaches, we think it's simple, perhaps. It's like we've been coaching this for 20 or 30 years. So we're like, hey, this should be simple. But then we get a new class coming in, freshmen, call it whatever you want, transfers, and it's brand new for them. What's your advice to coaches to understand if it's actually simple enough? It might be simple to us. How do we know if it's simple for the players?
Well, I think number one, you always, no matter what, whether it's in January when they get back from winter break, or it's in June when you get a new crop of freshmen, or it's in August when you start fall camp, you always start from scratch, man. I know. I think it might be. You may have heard this before, but there's an article about Peyton Manning, and he was challenging when he was kind of mid career, right? And he got a new quarterback coach, and he was challenged. Hey, look, coach me like I'm an eighth grader, like I've never done this before. That's what I want.
Peyton said that?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And so that was kind of one of our mantras. Working for CP was like, I coach them like it's an eighth grader. Doesn't matter how long they've been in the organization, how long they've done this. You have to start from square one. And so we would break down our fundamentals. Like each coach, we would have a coaching retreat, and I do this as a head coach and have done it as a head coach. And each coach was responsible to present to the other coaches in the organization, hey, what are your 3, 4, 5, whatever critical fundamentals that you have? And it was always fun to listen, but it was what was more fun was to see year one they were like really broad, and then everybody would get the point, which was that's too much,
Mm.
and then it would narrow and narrow and narrow, and then what would happen is over time, essentially we all had the same group of fundamentals. Techniques were going to be different from position to position, but the core fundamentals of the game should really be similar and simple, right? So, stance, transition, eyes, contact, like that's football, right? Like, everything's, you either have a balanced stance, which is a power stance, or a split stance, which is a speed stance. There's only two possible stances. Football is a game of transition. Everything you do on a play is going from speed to power or power to speed, right? Contact is a fundamental. The point at, and what's the point of football? You're either trying to create contact or avoid contact, right? That's it. And the point at which create meets avoid, that's where contact occurs. That's where every decision is made in the game, right? Your eyes see everything and interpret everything. And like, that's it. And then and then everything spins off of those 3, 4 fundamentals, if that makes sense. And so I think that's where I felt like I got better as a coach, because every year I had to listen to somebody present. I had to break it down in my mind. And then we started to pare it down and make it more simple for the players.
Yeah, I think what we're really talking about here is clarity. I think the best coaches provide clarity. Wherever there's not clarity, there creates confusion. And when I think about clarity, coach, I think also about, self-awareness. And I think that's kind of the starting point when it comes to high performance for athletes and coaches. And coach, every coach that I work with from a consulting base, I have them start with a personal mission statement. My mentor's mentor was a guy named Ken Ravizza, is one of the best sports psychologists ever to live. And one of the things he said, coach, was in order to be in control of your performance, you first need to be in control of yourself. And I know you've done some deep work in this area, listening to you on some other podcasts, and you've spoken about the importance of clearly defining your personal statement with questions like, why am I here? What's my coaching philosophy? How do I lead? Getting to know yourself. The inner game starts with yourself. Can you walk us through kind of your personal statement and how that anchoring and having that clarity has shaped you when it comes to being a leader?
Yeah, and I think kind of comes back to this idea of how simple can I make it, right? And I think that we kind of referenced this a minute ago. Like, there was a time in my career where I wanted to be the smartest guy in the room. I wanted to have the chalk last, so to speak, and reinvent the game and be on the cutting edge. And there's still that aspect of the tactical and strategic part of the game that is appealing. But for me, when I break this down as to why do I keep doing this, because it's a pain in the ass. Like, modern college football sucks. Let's not sugarcoat this at all. Like, paying play. I mean, yesterday was meeting payroll. I mean, I don't want to do that crap. That's not why I got into this, right? Negotiating with agents, worrying about your best players leaving. And again, and I know we're spinning off here a little bit, but like, one of the thoughts that I had a moment ago when you were talking about how do you simplify, why it's important to simplify things. Well, because your roster turns over constantly. You don't have guys for 3, 4, 5 years, especially at group of 5 schools. Our best players are going to leave. They're going to leave. And because financially, every kid in the recruiting, my son's loyal. He's never going to go anywhere. When he makes a decision, he's going to, well, that's good. But if we can pay him 35,000 and somebody else is going to pay him 1.3 million, he's going. And so that's another reason why you have to kind of dumb this stuff down. Like, you may not get to page 70, 80 of your playbook anymore. You have to be able to plug and play guys and banked reps that you might have been able to count on in the past as a junior, a senior, don't exist, especially at our level. But, spinning this back to why you do it, the why is still there. It's relationships, man. It's that simple. It's, for my personal vision for our program, my number one thing is take care of my people and add value to their lives. That's my number one thing. And the better job I do at that, the better our team, our organization, the individuals within our organization are gonna thrive. And I believe that you have to create an experience for people that is challenging and rewarding at the same time. You can't just go bowling all the time. That's not challenging, right? So on Monday, our guys hiked up to the peak of Mount Rose, which is in the Sierra Range, right? You see Lake Tahoe on the other side, the Washoe Basin and Reno on the other side. Well, it's 11,700 feet. You know what? Some of the guys that are 320 pounds struggled with that. It was damn hard for them. It was 5.5 miles one way, 2,000 vertical feet of climb in the last 2 miles. So that's pretty steep, right? But that created that experience for them. So, that is my number one thing is take care of my people, add value to their lives, and build authentic relationships. And the better job we do with that, the more success we're going to have.
Did that take you a while, coach, to figure out what your mission statement was? Or was there a time, pre-mission statement where you're kind of figuring things out and then you had this, awakening and then now you are the man you are today, the coach you are today? Was there kind of a moment, a shift?
I think anybody that wants to be a head coach in a leadership role, especially of a football organization, because it is big. It's I would like to say it's a small business. It's not. It's a medium sized business, right? You got 105 players now, and shoot, my staff and support staff is 35, 40 people, right? You better spend some time doing this long before the phone rings and you get the opportunity to interview. I started doing this a long, long time ago, and I wrote down the things that I wanted that were important to me. I wrote down offensive philosophy, defensive philosophy. I had my depth chart of my staff, my first choice, my second choice, my third choice at each position. What did I want to accomplish? How I was going to go about, even things like how do you engage stakeholders, and those are things that people don't think about, but that's the job. The job isn't calling plays. That's not the job. The job is motivating people, leading people, putting out fires, making tough decisions every day. My phone will ring 17 times. I'm on vacation. That doesn't matter. Nobody gives a shit, right? Like, Jeff, we got to make this decision. I didn't get my contract. It's July 1st. Well, now it's July 2nd. What's going on here? Yeah, okay, well, we'll work through it. And you got to do it to be good at it. I don't believe hey man, Dillingham, he's done a great job at Arizona State. Okay. It's not always going to be like that. That's not the job. The job isn't year one, you go in and everything's hunky dory and you make it to the college football playoff. That's 1 year. That's not the job. That's not what this is. And, you have to go through some hard times to be able to understand how to do the job well.
I think about mission statement, core values. I think of it like a compass, and wherever you are, it looks like kind of you might be in the wilderness right now. No matter where we are, a compass still can still point us north. And I think that's kind of the point of this mission statement and these core values is to bring you back, keep you back on track. Was there ever a time? I think it also helps to help you make decisions that might be tough. Was there ever a time that you had to lean on your mission statement, your core values to make an important decision, or say no to something or say yes to something? Was there a time in your life where you had to go back to who am I? What do I stand for in order to make a decision, whether as a coach or a family man?
Well, I mean, I'd like to kind of pigtail on what you just talked about there. Like, at the end of the day, everything that I do in my character education piece that we do, right? So let me kind of back up here for a second. So I want to make sure, like, how I look at development, right? Like, development is in recruiting, and yeah, like, that's the number one thing you're selling, right? I'm going to help you go from where you're at to where you want to be, right? So I see development in a specifically for football in a pretty clear way. Like, there's four things that you got to do, right? There's tactical development, which is learning the game, and that's the job of the coordinators. How are we going to attack quarters coverage? What blitz pattern is going to work against this slide protection, right? So that's the tactical part of it. Learning the game, the language, what we call 3x1 sets, what we call 2x2 sets. Then there's the technical development, and that's the specific techniques that are required to be successful at the position. That's the job of the position coach. He needs to be the expert on that. There's the physical development. All right. That's Jeff Jones in the weight room. That's Brittany Patera, my strength and conditioning, or my nutrition person. That's, our sports psych. That's our trainers. That's our PT. That's everything that, kind of builds this cocoon around the player. And then there's the psychological development, and that is my job. And that is exactly what you just talked about. It's challenging these young men to establish a set of values that will become their compass throughout their life. I tell them all the time, life is a river, not a rock, man. Right? What is important to you is going to change throughout your life as you become a husband, a father, a business owner, a leader, whatever. But who you are as a man should never shift. And when things get difficult, when it gets windy, when it gets rocky, when the rapids start to increase, that's what you're going to lean into, right? And so, like, that's everything that I'm trying to do with these kids. And so when things get hard for me, that's what I lean into, right? One of my things is honesty, like, and being brutally honest and confronting difficult things through being direct and honest. And probably some of the hardest things I've had to do as a leader is to fire people, like, to let people go. And when you lean into what is the greater good, what's in the best interest of the greater good of the organization, and candidly what might be in the best interest of that individual. And so those are the things that I lean into, is, being, leaning on authenticity, honesty, um, when you have to make tough decisions. And I think that's probably the hardest decision that most individual leaders have to make is, yeah, I've got to let this person go.
I think that's an area that doesn't get talked about enough. We want to talk about X's and O's. We want to talk about character development. But one of the big parts that doesn't get talked about is having difficult conversations. And as a leader and a head coach, what you might be surprised is how many difficult conversations you actually have to have. It might be firing somebody or it might be disciplining somebody, call it what you want. But if you're not really good or comfortable at having uncomfortable conversations, it's going to be a tough job. Coach, you've probably had several of them in your tenure. What advice would you give to coaches out there who aren't very good at uncomfortable conversations? They try to avoid them. What advice would you have to somebody to get a little bit better at that area? Because that's got to be a big part of being a leader, especially of a football organization.
Yeah, I think that human nature is that most people are going to be conflict averse, right? Nobody really wants somebody to say, "Oh, I'll make tough decisions," blah blah blah. But when it comes right down to it, a lot of times people will have somebody else have that conversation, or maybe not fully, kind of half tell somebody what's going on instead of being totally transparent and honest with them. And so I think that, like, number one thing is rip the band-aid off. Like, when you know. That's the one thing I would say. I mean, I can remember agonizing over decisions that were so obvious, but it was because I didn't want to have the tough conversation, right? And so had I just ripped the band-aid off, I would have saved myself a lot of sleepless nights and stress. Because, usually once you have that conversation, the weight is lifted for you and for the individual, because 9 times out of 10, that person kind of knows that there's something going on. And so that would be my number one thing, is rip the band-aid off. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like if you don't know exactly how to handle something, then you know exactly what you need to do, which is you need to confront it. And so that's something that I feel like is, I don't know. I mean, I've been around some really brilliant football coaches who sucked as leaders because they wouldn't confront people, and they wouldn't
Is,
call people on things, right? Like,
is there
go
a
ahead.
right way and a wrong way to do that? Is there a right way to confront and a wrong way to confront?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously you don't want, being adversarial is never going to be a positive for either one of the parties involved. But I think that, again, coming back to it, so you got to be you, like, like, I'm very matter of fact when I deal with discipline. I try to take emotion out of it as much as I can, whether that's with an individual staff member or a student athlete, whatever the case may be. And so me being, blowing sunshine up their ass is not going to be, they're going to, like, what's going on? That's not Choate, like, so I think that being authentic, again, is really important in those situations. But you also know, like, there's circumstances that if you know your people, you're going to know who can handle what. And so you kind of also have to have some compassion in those situations too.
Yeah. I once heard an NBA GM talk about the difference between environment versus culture, coach. And what he said was, in his kind of view, is that culture is kind of a long-term vision. Environment is, what do we do today? What's the environment
Right.
like today? So it's kind of two different things to look at. And what he said as the NBA GM is that his job is to build an environment where people can do their best work. That's his sole job as the NBA GM. Build an environment where people can do their best work. With that being said, Coach, what's the most important thing you do as a leader to help build an environment where people can do their best work?
Well, I think that's interesting because I think he's missing something there. Okay. You're selecting people.
Mm,
They should already fit the environment,
mm,
right? Like if the NBA GM's going, I'm going to build an environment where people can do their best work. Well, if they're not doing their best work, you selected the wrong people. And
sure.
that's on you as the general manager.
Hmm.
And so I think that's where it starts, right? It's about knowing who you are and where you are. Every single job I've taken has been different. What worked at Florida didn't work at Texas. What worked at Washington didn't work at Montana State. Every single place has its uniqueness. And I would say the same thing's true in any work environment, right? Working for Google is going to be different than working for Tesla, whatever, right? And so the number one thing is, okay, who are we and who works here? Who fits our environment? That's the number one thing. You can go draft the best basketball player in the world, but if the coach, the strength and conditioning outfit, like, if his game doesn't fit what you're trying to do, you're going to fail. And so I think he's completely missed the point, which is it's always about people first. Okay. And so I'm a big believer in the law of attraction. I know what I want here. I figured out, it takes 18 to 24 months to change a culture. I don't give a shit what anybody says. I've been a part of 10 of them. Okay. So I used to think you could be the guy that waves the magic wand. It may work. You may get the quarterback. You may have the point guard that can hit the three, but that didn't change the culture. That may have shifted the results in a given year, might have changed the environment temporarily, but you really didn't change or shift anything in that short amount of time. Okay. Because it's freaking work. And I know that because I've been a part of shifts at many, many places. Okay. And so that's the number one thing I think is that you gotta know who fits what environment you are creating. And once you do that, then it's about identification, evaluation, communication, and indoctrination, right? Like that's the person that's going to fit us. Well, how does that happen? A lot of times it's that law of attraction. What I put out into the universe is what I'm going to get. What I tell people we're about is a program. The ones that are attracted to that, those are the ones that are going to show up on official visits and eventually commit and hopefully win games for us on Saturdays in the fall.
Talk to me more about that shift. I could imagine you've been through several of these shifts. I've never heard a coach really say that 18 to 24 months. What are some things that coaches need to be aware of if they're taking over a program and, hey, we're picking up the pieces from this old coach and I'm not in a very good spot. I'm trying to turn the tide here. One of the things that I have heard is that it's really helpful when the best player on the team, the best physically gifted player, is bought into your stuff. Because whether we want to believe it or not, usually the best gifted player has a lot of influence on the team. So for right or wrong, if they're going to stay, generally speaking, broad strokes, it's nice when the best player is really bought in. I think that's one area, is making sure that your best players are bought in. Do you agree to that? And then also, what are some other ways that coaches can kind of turn the tide if they just got this head coaching job, they're excited, but they're picking up the pieces from a dismal program?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm living through it right now. We were 4-20 over the last 2 years before I got here. And then I walk in the building and we play a 13th game against a CFP team. We play the 28th hardest schedule in the country. Number one, you better recognize that it's not going to happen overnight. It's not. You can try to accelerate it however you want, but especially in the group of five level. Now, the power five level, especially like in a sport like basketball, if you've got the money, you can go out and buy a good roster immediately, right? And so you end up with these microcultures now in college athletics, right? Where, hey, I've got 18 to 20. It's like a position meeting room, right? Like, there's a team, and in football, there's a microculture within the linebacker room or the quarterback room or the D line room or whatever, right? Well, you can kind of infuse that. You can make that work a little faster in those environments because the groups are smaller. And it helps, obviously, like you said, if you have the influence of somebody that is viewed as a good player, a leader, a good person, whatever the case may be. But the downfall and the pitfall that you probably don't think about there is that they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear. They may be bought in. They may not be bought in. Everybody's bought in when there's success. Everybody's bought in when they get what they want. Hey, they got more NIL money. They're the starter. They get to go to media day, whatever. Everybody's bought in when they're getting what they want. Like, you don't know what you have until the shit hits the fan. And that's the beauty of starting at rock bottom. You know exactly what you have and who you are. You know exactly how people are going to respond when things don't go well, right? And then when things start to go well, you're like, okay, that's the individual that was a catalyst in helping us get there. I've seen it from both ends. I just don't like, we were not good year one at Washington when we went there. We were not good year one at Texas. Hell, we lost to Kansas in overtime in DKR, the only time they've ever lost to Kansas there. 2 years later, they're in the CFP, right? Montana State, we were not good when we went there. We were not good this year at Nevada. Maybe somebody else is better at the quick fix, but I feel like if you do it right, you're going to build the foundation for something that's going to be sustainable. And a lot of times leaning into an individual player who may have influence in the locker room temporarily is actually fool's gold, right? Sometimes what you got to do is you got to know, like, hey, I don't care if that guy believes in me or not. Like, you got to let him go. Chris Peterson, we had a DB who ended up being the NFL Defensive Rookie of the Year. You can look it up. Okay, I'm not going to say his name. He was an extremely talented player who had influence in the locker room, who was not doing the things the way that CP wanted them done. the best thing that ever happened to the culture in the long run at the University of Washington was Chris letting that guy go.
Wow.
And I did something similar this year with a couple of players. And I think it sends the message that, like, look, I don't care how talented you are. I don't care, how good looking you are, how popular you are in the weight room. None of that matters to me. What matters to me is that we have standards that we uphold within this organization. And if you do that, you'll be celebrated. And if you do not, you will not be tolerated.
Hmm. How do you stay standards focused when everybody wants to look at the scoreboard? So we're talking about this whole series is coaching beyond the scoreboard. And I think one of the things is easy to have the enjoyment. It's easy to trust this new coach when we have, that initial victory and when things are going really well. How do you create trust, buy-in, alignment when the result isn't lining up the way that everybody wants it to be?
Yeah. I think you got to be the same guy, win or lose. We're all going to be, we're going to celebrate and be excited on Saturday afternoon after a big win, and we're going to be disappointed and frustrated after a loss. But on Sunday, when you come in and you address the team, it's got to be the same stuff. It's like, hey, this is why we had success. Look, we made good decisions. We were accountable to our responsibilities. We lived up to our standards, whatever. And conversely, on the other side, hey, look, these are the things that got us beat. Without getting into the weeds of the tactical and technical part of it, right? So I think being consistent is really important, win or lose. Like, I know what I'm going to get when I walk into the building. Nobody wants to work for a stock market boss, right? And nobody wants to employ a stock market employee. The guy that is here one day and here the next. And I tell my players all the time, like, I can't game plan around you. If you're a 7-on-1 play and a 2 on the next, over time, I'm going to fire you because I can't predict which one I'm going to get on one player or the next. And so if you're a 5, be a goddamn 5 all the time. That's it. And I think the same thing's true from a leadership perspective. If you can be consistent and people know, you probably get a feel for my style just through this conversation, right? I'm going to require a certain level of intensity, a certain level of passion and work. And if you do it, you're one of us, and I will have your back for life. And if you don't, that's okay. This isn't the organization for you. Go find the one that works for you.
I love that stock market boss. I've never heard that, coach. I might have to take that from you. That's really good. There's a video that went pretty viral years ago. Kobe Bryant was with Lewis Howes, and Lewis asked him, "What does losing feel like to you?" And Kobe said, "It's exciting." And it was like, "What? It's exciting?" He goes, "Yeah, it's exciting because there are answers there." And then the next line I'll never forget, he said, "Whether you win or whether you lose, the process should be exactly the same. Whether we win or whether we lose, the process should be exactly the same. I come in, I ask myself 3 questions. What did I do well? What do I need to do better? And how am I going to improve on those things? And he asks those 3 questions after every single game, whether we win or we lose. And I think that's kind of what you're saying too, is no matter if we got the victory or not, I'm still coming to work on Monday and I'm still trying to figure out how to improve. Is that kind of the same language?
Yeah, no, I think it's spot on. Yeah, it's critical, I think, for any organization to kind of have that after action review, right? You want to step back, you want to evaluate what we did well, what we didn't do well, but you don't want to fly off the handle one way or the other, right? Like that's big shifts and dramatic decisions sometimes do happen mid-season, right? Sometimes that does happen, a coordinator change or whatever, but usually that's because there's been some kind of catastrophic failure or some serious lapse in judgment by people, right? Usually, if you want to salvage the experience for the student athlete, you've got to kind of be this guy through the season, and then you make the seismic shifts happen in the off season.
Yeah, one of the key lessons I've learned across these 10 interviews, coach, in different ways, every single coach has alluded to something along the lines of, if I want my team to be blank, I need to be blank. So if
Mm-hmm.
I want my team to be consistent with their emotions, I need to be consistent with my emotions. If I want my team to show up early, I need to show up early. And how everything really filters down from your actions. You need
Yeah.
to model the behavior that you want to see from your team. What does that look like for you, coach? How would you fill in the blank? If I want my team to be blank, I need to be blank. What would you put in those spots?
Yeah, I think I think tough, and I'm not talking about fist fight tough. I'm talking about resilience. I'm talking about being able to take an emotional shot and bounce back. I'm talking about showing up every day regardless of the circumstances And I think that is, if there's one word that I would like our team to be known as, hey, that is a tough team, man. They're a tough out. They're going to keep fighting. They're going to show up every day. They're going to be resilient. That's really what I want this football organization to be known as. Like they're a tough out. They're a tough team to play. They're physically tough. They're emotionally tough. They're mentally tough. That's what I want.
Can we double down on toughness? I hear that a lot. I think it's great. It sounds good on paper. It sounds good in this conversation. How do you implement that on a day-to-day basis? If we're talking environment is day to day, how do you create that?
Well, I think a big part of it is you've got to be really tough on implementing your standards,
Right.
right? Like the second a kid does something that does not live up to the standard, there's an immediate response. That is not how we do things here. And then there's a consequence, right? Whether that's a physical consequence, whether that's, hey, you lost the opportunity to train today because you chose to be late or whatever the case may be, right? So I think that's a part of it is like they know when the alarm goes off, I got to get up and go because if I don't, there's going to be a consequence. And then over time, right, what happens? That just becomes who they are, right? They've developed that those calluses have been built up, and that's a small way to do it. Training early in the morning, which takes discipline, which is a part of toughness, right? Having immediate consequences, right? Which will then build those calluses up. This is how I operate. I think those are things that you do, but you also have to find ways to put these guys in difficult situations, right? Get them out of their comfort zone. Most people don't like water or heights, one of the two. Well, last year we did a raft trip and dumped the rafts, and we went up to the Via Ferrata and climbed up these rocks in the Sierras, right? So, so you put people in situations that are going to stretch their toughness, right? Help them grow. And I think those are all things that you can do. But at the end of the day, you want a tough team, you better recruit tough people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
And
the
I think
strategy.
that,
Go. Oh, good.
well, I think that's it comes back to what I'm talking about. It's like all these people want to complain about what they do. Hey, we're not a very fast football team. Well, then recruit fast players. Hey, we're not a very resilient football. Well, recruit resilient people. And so I think that comes back to, again, identification, evaluation, communication, and indoctrination. That is how you build an organization that will have success. You don't do a good job in those areas, you can be the most brilliant tactician in the world and you're going to fail
Mm-hmm.
because people win. Not plays, not coaches. It is what it is.
I love the strategy for coaches out there to be able to identify whatever the standard was that wasn't withheld and just get after it right away. Ray Bouchard coached 30 years at Kansas volleyball, and we had a chance to be in this series. And one of the quotes he said, I'll never forget, it's very simple, but whenever you step over a standard, you just created a new standard. So whenever I step over something, kid is late, I'm like, I'm not going to deal with it. That's the new standard now, that it's okay to be late. So that's kind of the thought coaches listening in is every time you step over something and you don't address it, it's now become a new standard. And so people might think like, oh man, you're dramatizing this. It's just one kid being late. It's like, no, that's the attention to detail that you have to have if you're really trying to draw a line in the sand is that every single person follows through with the standard that we've created. Would you put your stamp of approval on that, coach?
100%. I mean, and we had a deal come up the other day. We were having a pretty good summer, and I walk out and 7:55. We're supposed to start stretching for the PRP, and 7:57. One guy comes out. 7:58. Another guy comes, and I lost my mind. And I didn't lose my mind on the players. I was mad at the coaches because one of them was a wide receiver, one of them was a D lineman, one of them was a DB. It's like, no, that's on you. You allowed this to happen, right? Now, I did make everybody go back in the locker room and we dressed them down and talked about it. And you know what the players are doing? They're all nodding their heads like, yeah, you're damn right. That's not how we do shit around here. And so I was fired up about that. Like, okay, that's a win. But yeah, what's permitted is promoted, right? You have to be consistent and you have to and that's hard, right? Like, it's funny to me how when you step from an assistant coach role to a coordinator role to a head coach role, if you're good at your job, your vision broadens, right? Like you might not notice that your guy doesn't have his tail pad in or something like that as a position coach, but as a head coach, you notice that his shirt isn't tucked in or that his back flap's hanging out or that he didn't tape today. You start to look at all these details, and I think that's what makes better coaches are more tuned into the details.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a great point. I love that line. What is permitted is promoted. That's really good. Coach, been through a lot of different programs. You've been all over the country. What do you think are the top three things that get in the way of teams reaching their potential? And I want to take out the answer of injuries because that's out of most people's control. What do you
Right.
think from all colleges that you've been at, universities you've been at, what are the top three things that usually get in the way of a team succeeding or hitting their potential?
Yeah, well, I think discipline is number one. Whether that's the coaches lacking the discipline to make the hard decisions, or enforcing the standards in a way that allows the players to become more disciplined. I think that's one of the things that, especially when you have a talented team, right? Like where you should be better than you are. So that's usually one. And sometimes that takes some, as I spoke about earlier, it takes some time to establish that discipline and the type of culture that you want to have. Um, I worked for Mike Leach for a year. Okay. And Mike was an interesting guy. He I'd worked for Chris Peterson for 6 years, and then I went to work for Mike Leach. You couldn't have more different human beings, right? The difference between Chris Peterson, who was able to win championships, and Mike Leach, who was a brilliant football mind, was Chris demanded discipline consistently. Mike did not care. Just show up and play. I'm good, right? Mike never won a championship. Not one. Not in the Big 12, not in the Pac 12. Rarely won bowl games. But he would knock off a USC who was number 3 in the country, or Texas that was number 1 in the country. And that was the difference, was discipline. And Chris was such a stickler for those details, and Mike was more free-form football, right? So that was number one. I don't even know if you have to go to 2 or 3, because if you lack that, what matters? So I think generally speaking, that's what it's going to be.
Is it interesting? So I do this activity with teams that I work with, and we talk about, hey, what are the top three things that could get in the way from us reaching our potential? Take out injury. I ask you the same question I ask the team, and then they write them down on post-it notes, coach, and then I unveil these two boards in the front of the room. One is sport related, one is human related, and every single time the human related board is full of post-its, and the sport related board is pretty much empty. And what it kind of tells us is that even if we have the best X's and O's, the best coaches, the best talent, even if we have those things, if we don't have the human side figured out, discipline, lack of effort, lack of focus, constant, whatever you want to put it in all those, it doesn't matter. These things are going to matter more than these things do. And so when I hear from you, it's a human related issue. Once again, it's discipline. That to me, that's a human related issue. Yes, there are some X's and O's and execution that comes with the sports side of being disciplined. But what are your thoughts on that? On that, there are more issues when it comes to reaching our potential on the human side than there are the sports side.
Yeah, I think the two things that pop into my head immediately. Okay, one, let's talk about the wishbone, which revolutionized college football in the 60s and 70s, right? Okay, what was the premise of that? Was it crazy, sophisticated, high flying offense? No, it was about discipline. And if you wanted to execute it at a high level, everybody had to do their job consistently really well. And if you wanted to stop at a high level, everybody had to do their job consistently at a high level really well, right? And so, like, that's an easy thing to look at. It was the same freaking 3 plays over and over and over and over, out of the same formation.
Right.
There was nobody was fooling anybody, but yet it was king for a decade in college athletics and college football, right? We played the University of Oregon when I was at Boise. Oh, God, it was Chip Kelly's first game. Okay, so we'd gone to Autzen the year before and we beat them, and then they were coming in. We were both the top 10 teams. They had Jeremiah Masoli, I think, was their quarterback. Garrett Blunt was their tailback. I mean, they were star-studded, loaded, right? And they had a lot of offense. They were pretty sophisticated on offense. We ran 3 calls the entire game on defense, and one of them probably 80% of the time. And we executed it with precision and detail because of the discipline of our players. And we beat them. And we beat them soundly. Would have shut them out if they hadn't, kicked the field goal. Okay. And so, like, those are the illustrations that I use over and over and over again. It's like, it's not what you do, it's how you do it that matters. And that requires, it's not sexy. It requires discipline. And all the other things that you talked about, like lack of effort or whatever, like, shit, that's just discipline too.
Just coded in a different way. I
Yeah,
love it.
exactly.
Coach, what's a private coaching win that you're most proud of that nobody knows?
I mean, I'd probably say, um, I've been married for 29 years to the same woman, and we always joke like, I'll introduce her occasionally. Hey, this is my first wife. Um, and I have two awesome kids, man. I mean, my son, so he's up here for a couple of days with us at our place in North Idaho, and my daughter just did a semester at sea. My son's got his degree and plays music, and like those are the wins, man. Like that, the older you get, the more important that stuff becomes. And unfortunately, it should have been more important earlier in life when you're trying to climb the ladder. But those are the things that I really take a lot of pride in. And then there's some kids that I know I've made a difference in.
Hmm.
I know those were like real wins. Like, had I not invested my time, energy, and efforts into helping that young man or giving that young man an opportunity, and I credit them for walking through the door, but there's been a decent amount of those in my career too.
Would you, without saying any names, do you have a story that exemplifies that?
Oh gosh, I got a lot. I got a lot. I mean, I think it's like there's this idea, this sense of future orientation, like creating um, an aspect of what you think somebody can become, and how impactful that it like that one person that believes in you, right?
Hmm.
That kind of opens, oh gosh, I can do this. And we have this exercise we do called the 4 H's, which is tell me about your home life, a hardship that you've had, an honor that you've received. And so like those are the things. And so it's kind of a short way of telling your life story, right? And we were doing 4 H's one time, and this guy was actually coaching for me at Montana State, and he was telling a story about how when he was a freshman in college, he was going through it, and there was this coach that came, and they're in the dining hall, and sat down next to him and recognized he was having kind of a tough day, and told him, gosh, I think you're going to be a great player here, man. I really do. I think that you've got everything it takes to do this, and I'm really proud of how far you've come in a short amount of time. I know it's not easy, whatever. Well, that was me that had sat next to this kid and told him that. And for 10 years later, to hear him tell a group of freshmen, hey, this guy made a
Wow.
difference in life.
Wow. Wow, that's impactful, man. I think sometimes as coaches, we don't know if we're making an impact, and that's the thing about being a transformational coach and coaching beyond the scoreboard is sometimes we don't know until years later. And one of the things I say over and over on this series is that you're a transformational coach if your mailbox is full of wedding invitations.
Yeah.
If they want you to be a part of their lives after they leave your program, you're a transformational coach. The hard part about it is you kind of have to wait. Duke coach Mike Krzyzewski always said you have to. That's the hardest part about being a transformational coach. You got to wait 8 to 10 years to see what kind of people they are and if they want to include you in their life. Whereas the
Yeah.
transactional side, that's very right here, right now. Do we win or do we not on Saturday? And that's what so many people get focused on. That's why I'm doing the series, coach, is to try to get people to understand it's much more fulfilling, but it's also more long-term vision when we talk about being that transformational coach. It's more out, it's more in the future than right here, right now.
I agree. And I think that, I've seen all sides of this. Like you get to see human beings literally at their very best and at their very worst in this job. And when you expose yourself in that way, you're raw and authentic and vulnerable and all those things. Um, Man, those bonds are different. I truly believe this, and this is not a knock on another sport. The last great training ground for young men in the United States of America outside of the military is football. That's it. Nothing is going to be harder, more demanding, more challenging. Playing football is assuming risk, right? Ridicule, failure, physical harm. Like it is what it is, and it's we got to protect this game. And in a lot of ways, we're screwing it up, candidly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I think that for all those reasons, you have the ability to really develop these deep bonds that should last a long time if it's done correctly. Versus, hey, yeah, help me win a championship. Here's your ring. There's the door. you know. Um, I don't know. I mean, college football is an interesting job right now.
Yeah, yeah, it is very interesting. I want to go back to your marriage of 29 years. I think when I talk about coaching beyond the scoreboard, there's a lot of things that go into this bucket. One of the areas that doesn't get talked about a lot is your relationship with your significant other. And
Yeah.
from my consulting work, I've seen a lot of men specifically struggle with their marriage because their job is so demanding, and you know more than anybody, especially at the college level, which is different than the high school level. I understand that, and that's kind of the arena I'm in. But I think we can all kind of come together here, especially the men listening. You've been able to do this for 29 years at a high level all across the country and still say that's the biggest private win of your life. I would love to hear for the fathers out there, for the husbands out there, myself included, what advice would you give knowing that, hey, being a spouse of a coach is difficult. It's really hard. There's long seasons, there's long nights, there's long weekends, there's really no off time. What advice would you have for the coaches out there who are trying to balance that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. Number one, don't take yourself too seriously. Um, I mean, I'm a high paid PE teacher, really. Okay, that's what I am. Like, so let's not. I'm not curing cancer. I'm not, so like, hey, I know you got all these trophies on the wall, and you think you've done all this, but like, it's a game at the end of the day, right? So, um, you know, there's because, and she does a pretty good job of. Janet will make sure that I remember that from time to time. This is like, hey, look, all right, there, big shooter, relax a little bit, so having somebody that can humble you in a way that we all need, right? So I think that that balance really is looking at your partnership more as a, like, she's my teammate, like, we're in this together. Like, this isn't me going out there and coaching the football team. This is us doing this, and so really framing your relationship like that, because they have to make a lot of sacrifices. Your spouse has to do a lot of things, raise your kids, um, listen to people talk crap about their husband or whatever,
Mhm.
and so framing it as more of a, that, like, hey, we're in this together, this is a team decision, and that's important. And then I think the other thing that is really critical is that, I lost the feed there for a second, sorry about that. um, you take time for you. You better invest in that relationship and not neglect it. Just like you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and you go in and you get your workout in, and you have your morning routine, whether that, read the Bible, daily stoic, whatever it is, right? And you better freaking invest in your relationship with your spouse, or it will fall apart too. And so, and that those are probably the two things is, look and remember that you have a teammate in this thing. It's not just you. So don't take yourself too seriously. And number two, you've got to invest in the relationship to make it work.
Last question, coach. What's the best coaching advice that a coach gave you?
Yeah. Um, Probably coach the person, not the player. Just if you can figure out how to make them tick, you know, in their head and their heart, you can get them to do whatever you need them to do. It has nothing to do with what you want, that, what kind of stance you want them in and where you want the hand placement and all that. But if you can touch their heart, you can probably create a lot of wins um, beyond the scoreboard. So,
Perfect way to end it. Coach the person, not just the player. Coach, thanks for your time. You've got a new fan in me. How can my listeners best support you and your program?
shoot, man, follow me on Coach Choate Football, Instagram and X, and hopefully you'll see what we're trying to do at the University of Nevada to turn that program around, and maybe there'll be some inspiration for you as well.
Man, can't wait to watch you guys this fall. Good luck the rest of the summer. Thanks for taking time.
You bet, man. Take care.